Alright, so in today's video is going to be a little different. What I'm going to do is basically discuss the wave chart and the key um, on interpreting it, like the basics. This is not everything, but it is the basics. So basically, wave charts, you have waves that go up and waves that go down and waves that go up and waves that go down. And this is the Wyckoff invented this chart. He created it. Some may call it a zigzag, but it's not just a zigzag. Alright, now the key with this is that it is used for tape reading. Okay? Now there are multiple implementations of it. It can be used with price and time. And by price and time I mean, like, okay, the rotation is 15 ticks or 15 pips, and the time, like, let's say 15 ticks, and the time is 15 minutes, for example. Okay, so it can be used with price and time on each swing, so 15 15. Okay, so that's one way of looking at the data for each swing. The other is to use price and volume. So 15 ticks, 15,000 contracts. You pick whichever style you want to use. Alright, some folks will say, you know what, just use price and forget time and volume. Others who, they get to the next level, they will use two variables, time or volume, along with price. Okay. For tape reading, you need to use, Wyckoff recommended, at least two, price and time or price and volume. So what I want to do is focus on price and volume. The way Wyckoff did it was, he basically, in his course, he had two chapters. The first chapter went over price and time and how to use price and time. The second chapter after that, he used volume. He also used activity, but it's not going to be easy to use activity. So you might be able to use number of bars or something like that, but I don't want to bring in a third variable because I don't think it's necessary, and price and volume is enough. It really is. Alright, so let's consider this. Price and time can be done also, but let's move on to price and volume. For tape reading, in my opinion, I would say price and volume is better. I think he used price and time because he realized people didn't have access to wave volume back then. But what they did have access was to their clock, and they were able to see, okay, it's 15 minutes this wave lasted for. It lasted for 15 minutes. They were not able to calculate the volume of each bar and then add it up and say, okay, this is 15,000 contracts. It's much more tedious and difficult to do. If I draw a swing, it's very easy for me to say, okay, the start and the end, this started at 2 o'clock and this ended at 2:15, 15 minutes. But it's much harder for me to calculate the volume on each bar and add it up and add it up and add it up, especially if you have multiple bars. So this is why he used price and time, and then later on he went to price and volume. In the next subsequent chapter, he covered price and volume. Anyway, before, so we're going to analyze this method, price and volume method. Before going into that, like, I want to explain, when you see a tape, you're getting basically price and volume. If you see a time and sales tape, it has price and volume. It really has nothing else. It just has price and volume, and I think they have some other variables you can add, like bid, ask, blah blah blah. But essentially, it's price and volume. There are other, there is an other factor, like how it they use speed. There is that factor of speed. You know, for example, the tape gets really slow, and then turns, or you might have the tape going really fast and activity picks up. So there is a thing with speed, but we're not going to look at that because for I guess like on a chart you can basically see, all right, you know, and just look at the x-axis and you'll be able to see there's a lot of price movement in a short amount of time because the wave has a high angle of ascent. So and there you can just use speed, but not really necessary. Okay, so that is also a factor. Activity is also a factor. Activity is, I think then it was measured as the number of, I'm not sure, I think it was the number of trades in a small amount of time, like how much, and I think they measured the actual tape, like how many in feet, and said, okay, the activity has picked up because all of these trades are coming in, so many trades are coming in, the market has a lot of activity. So it's kind of like speed. The other factor is support and resistance, or this term was coined by Wyckoff, but I think he initially called it support and pressure. Later on it was support and resistance, but the idea is support and resistance is pressure, areas where pressure came in, or resistance is areas where supply came in. Same thing. So we have price, volume, activity, support and resistance, and and time, right? So these are all the factors of tape reading: price, volume, time, speed or activity. Activity is the right term, and then support and resistance levels. For what I'm going to explain, we just need price and volume on the wave chart. And of course, you really should use the high time frame support and resistance levels. And I think that is more than enough. Looking at activity and looking at, what was the other one? Time. I think time is intuitive by the amount of progress price makes, because you see that if it's going straight up, it's done in a short amount of time. If the wave is going straight up in a short amount of time, it's going to have a high angle of ascent. So that's intuitive. And so I really don't want to clutter the chart. It gets very difficult to read and it defeats the purpose, and you won't do it. As simple as that, you just won't do it. So this is maximum number of variables you want on a chart, along with marking it up at various levels. Okay, so now let's take a look at price and volume. Okay, how do they fit? How do they fit together? You want to take a look at volume and its relationship to price as the force and the resulting movement. Okay, that's how you want to view it. The amount of force given to price and how much price moves. So for example, if they have 10,000 contracts and price is only moving 10 ticks versus 10,000 contracts, and price is moving 20 ticks, this is very meaningful. Okay, and let me explain. So let's take the second one. All right, let's say you had 10,000 contracts, and this is 10 ticks. So here you have 10,000 contracts, and it moves 10 ticks. Now compare this to another wave that has 10,000 contracts but move 20 ticks. 20 ticks or 20 pips. Okay, so what can you say? What can you say? You can say that this had much more ease of movement, or volume of 10,000 was able to push price further. Very logical, right? The same amount of volume in both swings, yet the second one was able to move price further. Okay? Now remember this, at each price you have supply and demand. Each price you have supply and demand. Each level you have supply and demand. At each level of those 10 ticks or 20 ticks, you have supply and demand. So given this information, if you see a wave that goes 20 ticks, and then at a wave that only goes 10 ticks, what can you say about supply and demand? You can say that the first one made less progress, so supply is stronger. I just put STR. Supply is stronger. Why? Because with the same amount of volume, it could not push price far enough. Remember, you have supply and demand at each level. So it's absorbing, the demand is absorbing the supply, but it cannot push it that far. Where in the first example, demand was able to push it much further. So supply was not as strong. So here you have to say supply is weaker. Or you can say, it doesn't matter if you say demand is stronger or supply is weaker. Essentially here it's the same thing. Okay, because remember, each level has supply and demand, supply and demand, right? If you look at DOM or whatever, you'll see each level has supply and demand. So demand is able to push supply up. Okay, because each level has less supply, which means it's easier for demand to push further, to go higher. But in the first case, supply is stronger because demand is really, with all that force of volume, it's really unable to kind of push. It's having a lot of difficulty because each level must have more supply, or somewhere up here must have had more supply, and demand cannot push supply. So now how is this applied? For the tape reader, he is looking at supply and demand, he's looking at price and volume, and he sees, oh, this is, an uptrend. It's going up. Now he's going to compare, for example, these two waves. And here you have this situation where you have 10,000 contracts, but it moved 20 ticks. So I'll just put 20. Okay? Here you have the same 10,000 contracts, but it only goes 10 ticks. That tells the tape reader that supply is coming in, and or that supply is stronger, or whatever, but the point is the supply is getting stronger. Why? Because in the last wave you have the same amount of volume, but you have less distance, right? Now imagine, let's take it an even more extreme example. You have 10,000 in this wave that moves 20 ticks. Here, you have 20,000 that moves only 10 ticks. You see? For sure, has come in. It has come in, it has come in, it has come in. Why? Because 10,000, which is less volume, was able to move price 20 ticks, and after that, double the volume, meaning not 10 but 20,000 contracts, was only able to push price half as much. So for sure what? For sure supply is stronger on the second wave than it is on the first wave. This is the essence of tape reading. Using supply and demand. This is the law of supply and demand. This is the fucking law of supply and demand, and how to interpret it at a very fundamental level using price and volume. So now, real examples where you see this. Let's go all the way down. We can observe these 2 points here. This point and this point. Here you have 13,000. This is in volume. Okay. The amount of volume is 13,000. The amount of price progress is 34 pips. But who cares? Let's say it's a futures contract and it's 34 ticks. Alright, so let's just say it's a futures contract, but it doesn't matter what market you use this in. Let's just say it's 13,000 contracts and it's able to move 34 ticks. Or whatever, you want to use Forex, 34 pips. It don't matter. Alright, the concept is the concept. So 13,000 moves 34 pips or ticks, whatever. The next wave has more volume, not 13 but 15. So if the first wave is 13,000 and produces 34 pips, what do you expect for the next wave, which has more than 13,000 volume to push? Your expectation is that it should be similar or slightly more pips. So it should be 34 or higher, because 13,000 pushed price 34 pips. 15,000, which is more volume, should push price 34 pips or more. But instead, it pushes price 17 pips. What just happened? 13,000 pushes price 34 pips, but 15,000 pushes price half as much? You mean the same amount of volume only produced half the result? The same amount of volume, the same amount of effort only produced half the reward or half the result? How could it go down from 14 to 17? It's because as price is going down, demand is coming in. Demand is coming in. That is why the price did not go as much as the prior wave. It did not go for 34 pips. It only went 17. That is a clear indication where you have more volume but less than half the price progress, indicating demand is coming in on this down wave. And the other thing I like is when it goes and makes a higher high after that. That really is telling you that, you know, that demand has just taken control. They were buying on the pullback here on this wave down. Demand was buying, 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 buying. Before that, sellers were just pushing price down. Then on this wave, demand was not letting it do that. It was buying. There's buying here, and then when they're done, there's buying on the up wave as well. After that, you had a low volume pullback, and look what happened. Fly. So that is the essence of tape reading using a wave chart with the variables of volume and its ability to push price as an indicator for supply and demand. And that's all, folks. Take care.